Welcome, seekers of the unknown, to another episode of Tales from Urban Myth Apparel. I am your guide through the hidden and the haunted, the Reaper. And tonight, we enter a darker domain, not one of creatures or conspiracy, but something far more intimate. The terror of being taken over, the nightmare of losing control. This is the story of possession. It's not just a trope in horror films or a warning in ancient texts. Possession is one of the oldest fears known to humankind. The idea that something else can slip into your body, hijack your thoughts, and corrupt your very soul. But where do these stories come from? And why, after centuries, do they still possess us? Long before the first horror film rolled, civilization spoke of spirits, malicious, wandering, hungry, capable of inhabiting the human body. In Babylon, over 4,000 years ago, clay tablets spoke of evil wind spirits, entities that entered through the mouth or ears, causing disease and madness. One such story tells of a man seized by despair and paralysis. Priests performed rituals with incantations and offerings to banish the spirit. Herbs were burned. Salt was scattered. A statue was buried to trap the demon. It wasn't superstition. It was survival. Possession wasn't just feared. It was diagnosed. In Christian scripture, Jesus himself confronted the possessed. In the Gospel of Mark, a man is said to live among tombs, cutting himself with stones, crying out day and night. No chains could hold him. When Jesus asked his name, the man didn't answer. The demon did. "My name is Legion," it said, "for we are many." Jesus cast the spirits into a herd of pigs, which then threw themselves into the sea. This wasn't just a miracle. It was a message that evil can live inside you, and that salvation requires struggle. In Islamic tradition, possession is often linked to the jinn, supernatural beings made of smokeless fire. Some are harmless, others not. One story tells of a man who grew violent and delusional after desecrating a sacred spring. His family sought help from a religious healer who recited verses from the Quran. For hours, the man fought as if something inside resisted the words. When the jinn finally left, the room filled with the stench of sulfur. Islam teaches that jinn can whisper evil into human hearts, but when invited, through arrogance, sin, or ignorance, they can do much worse. From Babylon to Bethlehem to Mecca, cultures crafted rituals not to explain madness, but to fight it. In each tradition, possession explained the unexplainable: illness, anger, madness, and the fear that who you are might not be entirely yours. Some possession stories vanish into folklore, but others are chronicled in blood and fire, in newspaper clippings and court transcripts. These aren't just tales of torment, they're history. Moments where the line between the real and the unreal completely dissolved. In the year 1634, in the quiet French town of Loudun, a convent of Ursuline nuns erupted into chaos, screaming, convulsing, speaking in tongues. They claimed they were under demonic assault. The source? A priest named Urbain Grandier, a man who had challenged church authority and made powerful enemies. His trial was more theater than justice. The exorcisms were public, the accusations grotesque. Grandier was convicted of witchcraft and burned at the stake in the town square. Some say the nuns were manipulated. Others insist they were under true spiritual attack. Either way, Loudun became one of the earliest and most disturbing mass possession cases in recorded history. More than half a century later, in 1692, fear ignited again, this time in Salem, Massachusetts. It began with a handful of young girls suffering fits, visions, and unexplainable outbursts. They accused others of tormenting them through sorcery. Outsiders, midwives, widows, even their neighbors. The town fell into a frenzy. Over 200 people were accused. At least 20 were executed. Though history calls it a witch trial, many of the symptoms described, erratic behavior, violent contortions, and speaking in strange voices, mirror what we now associate with possession. But Salem didn't seek spiritual understanding. It sought punishment, and it found it in the noose. In 1976, in West Germany, a young woman named Anneliese Michel faced demons, literal or otherwise. Her descent began with depression, but soon escalated into growling, violent fits, an aversion to sacred objects, and voices that claimed to be ancient spirits, Lucifer, Judas, Nero, and more. She underwent 67 exorcisms over 10 months. She refused to eat. She begged to be freed. When she died of malnutrition at the age of 23, the world was stunned. Her parents and priests were put on trial for negligent homicide. Her voice, captured on tapes during the rituals, still chills listeners to this day. Was it possession, or a failure to recognize a mind in agony? And then there's the case that changed horror forever. In 1949, in Maryland, a 14-year-old boy, known only by the pseudonym Roland, became the center of something horrifying. After using a Ouija board to contact a deceased aunt, his family noticed strange phenomena: scratching sounds, furniture moving on its own, holy symbols being violently rejected. But then it escalated. Marks appeared on his body. He spoke in unknown languages. He entered trance-like states no one could break. Jesuit priests performed several exorcisms across weeks and locations. Witnesses claimed to see beds shaking and objects flying across the room. In the end, the rites seemed to succeed, and the boy returned to a normal life. But his ordeal became the inspiration for The Exorcist, the story that dragged demonic possession out of shadow and into the spotlight. 4 lives, 4 decades, 4 reckonings. Each one leaves us with the same lingering question: when someone changes beyond recognition, when they scream with a voice that isn't theirs, when fear becomes a presence in the room, are we facing madness or something that thinks inside us when someone claims to be possessed? What's really happening? Is it a spiritual invasion, or is the mind unraveling under the weight of something unseen? Modern science offers answers, cold, clinical, and incomplete. But even in these sterile diagnoses, the symptoms remain unsettling. Dissociative identity disorder, once known as multiple personality disorder, is a psychological condition where a person fragments into separate identities. Each one can have its own name, gender, voice, and demeanor. One personality may speak calmly, while another growls in an unknown language. Some call it the brain's defense against trauma. Others, a mask for something more unnatural. Either way, those who witness it often can't tell the difference between mental fracture and full-blown possession. Psychosis is a complete break from reality. It brings voices no one else can hear, shadows that stalk without shape, commands that feel divine or diabolical. A psychotic episode can convince someone they're being controlled, or worse, that they've become someone or something else. And then there's temporal lobe epilepsy, a neurological condition where electric storms erupt deep inside the brain's emotional core. victims may enter trance-like states, speak in fragments, see visions, cry out without cause. Doctors call it misfiring neurons. But when the result looks like a possession straight out of ancient scripture, even skeptics start to hesitate. Even the Catholic Church, no stranger to spiritual warfare, doesn't leap into exorcism lightly. Before a rite is approved, the person must undergo a full medical and psychiatric evaluation. Blood tests, brain scans, psychological profiling, sleep studies, interviews with family, doctors, and clergy. They rule out every natural explanation: mental illness, substance abuse, neurological disorders, before even considering the supernatural. Only when the unexplainable remains, when the symptoms persist despite medicine, when sacred objects provoke violent reactions, when a person knows languages they've never studied, does the church escalate the case to trained exorcists. But what do you do when a person speaks a language they've never learned? When they defy their own strength? When they whisper secrets they couldn't possibly know? Coincidence? Delusion? Or is science peering into a spiritual storm and only seeing the surface? Not all possession is evil. In Haitian Vodou, spirits take over the body in joyful communion. In Balinese trance rituals, gods speak through dancers. In Ethiopian Christianity, exorcisms are regular spiritual practice. But Hollywood rarely shows this side. It prefers the demonic, the spectacle, the horror, the priest, the cross, the scream. And while the ritual may be theatrical, the fear, all too real. Possession isn't just a horror plot. It's a question, a fear, a mirror. What happens when your mind is no longer your own? What if the voice in your head isn't yours? Science may dismiss it. Religion may warn against it. But we keep telling the stories because they speak to something ancient, something we can't quite exorcise. So we ask you, do you believe? Could it happen to anyone? Could it happen to you? Explore the full Possessed collection now at Urban Myth Apparel and wear what you fear. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and above all, stay prepared. Because sometimes the scariest monsters live inside.